So there is something in which we all can agree upon. And the one thing that we all agree upon is that Jesus was indeed different than us. He was one of us, yet he did not act, talk, or behave like one of us. There was always going to be something different which made Christ different from the rest of us. And yes, it is very much to the fact that he is very much God. Hindsight is always 20/20, isn't it? But when we looked at Christ, we realized that, he was one of us. But yet he wasn't one of us. When you recognize that someone is different from yourself, you know that they are one of us, but not one of us. I know it seems kind of odd that I keep saying that, but to give you an example of this, when I was in junior high, or what is now called middle school, I used to hang out with the outcasts. Those who would sit alone in the cafeteria, the corner of the corner table of the cafeteria, eating by themselves, not really talking to anybody. They just seemed to be left to themselves. And so I naturally gravitated towards those people. And I sat with them, I ate with them, I hung out with them afterwards, because usually after we got done in the cafeteria, our middle school or our junior high would kind of kick us outside for the remainder of the lunch period, and then after lunch was done, they would let us back in. And so I'd hang out with them during that time. And so, even though I hung out with them, even though I talked with them, I was not one of them. Because I did things differently than the rest of them. In fact, it's kind of strange to be in a group, but not really considered to be part of the group, because I was different, and they knew it. In fact, they said things that were like, Nathan, you're awesome, but you're not one of us because you don't do these things. And I was like, well, okay, thanks. So I was one of them, but not one of them. And it should be no surprise that Jesus also did things different. Jesus did things that people didn't quite recognize what he was doing. They thought he was doing things differently. They thought he was doing things wrong. But as people began to recognize this about Christ, that he was indeed different from all the rest that had come before, they began to follow him. And so we saw last week as Jesus' ministry begins, he heads to the Sea of Galilee. And while he goes to the Sea of Galilee, he calls 4 of the 12 disciples, which are Peter, Andrew, James, and John. And then from traveling from Galilee, he is teaching in synagogues. He's proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom. He is healing all the sickness and afflictions of the people as he goes. For the people are seeing that he is different from those who had come before. But not only did they recognize how he was different and how he had begun to heal the sick and the afflicted and performing great miracles, people from all around over Syria and Galilee began to come to him. They began to follow him. In fact, so many began to hear about him and follow him because he was different from the rest that had come before. People from the Decapolis, Galilee, Jerusalem, Judea, and beyond the Jordan followed him. So the crowds were mixed of both Jew and Gentile. So we come to this powerful moment when everyone is seeing how Jesus is different from everybody else. And so Christ heads up the side of a mountain and delivers the Sermon on the Mount, which is found in Matthew 5 through 7. And after giving this amazing and powerful teaching, Jesus comes down off the mountainside and was confronted by a man. A man who wanted him to do something. So if you'll turn in your Bibles to Matthew 8, we'll be looking at verses 1 through 4. When Jesus came down from the mountain, large crowds followed him. A man with leprosy came and knelt before him and said, "Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean." Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. "I am willing," he said. "Be clean." Immediately he was cleansed from his leprosy. Then Jesus said to him, "See that you don't tell anyone, but go show yourself to the priest and offer the gift Moses commanded as a testimony to them." May the Lord bless the reading of his holy word. This is truly a moment in which we recognize how truly different Jesus is from everybody else. Christ is willing to interact with a person who has leprosy. A person who is designated as being unclean. A person who had been shunned by the community because of their affliction. And so we find ourselves in Matthew 8, 1 through 4. We see that an outcast has come to Christ to be healed. A person who is no longer considered to be part of the community because of their affliction and had been forced to live away from everybody, had waded through a crowd, and has come and knelt before Christ saying, "If you are willing, you can cleanse me." And perhaps the man is there because he had heard about the many healings that Jesus had done. And because, according to the laws that he had to follow as a leper, the man had to carefully and painfully make his way through the crowd, as to not touch any other, to reach Jesus as he was coming down the mountain. And so the leper appears before Christ, kneels, and he only asks one thing. And if we are paying careful attention to what we see here in Matthew 8, 1 through 4, we see more that is revealed about who Christ is through his short interaction with the leper. This is something in which Christ does and shows how much different he is from everyone else. This reveals more about the work of Christ and his ministry to the world than it appears to be in these 4 verses. Now, I'm sure you are aware and understand that the leper is quite a significant person in this verse. We read the story, and we think is all about is Jesus is willing to heal another person afflicted with a terrible disease. But there is more to it. Do not misunderstand anything